where me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events. And I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewbs, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dewbs & Co.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
And welcome to On the Money, where we're focused on the UK's cost of living crisis, helping you beat the squeeze. I'm Liam Halligan, and for the next hour, we'll be talking about semiconductors, those silicon chips, components vital in the manufacture of everything from cars to medical equipment. Should China be allowed to take over the UK's biggest semiconductor manufacturer? Plus, the latest on the massive Easter holiday travel disruption, and why the Treasury's suddenly interested in cryptocurrencies. All that after the GB News headlines with Rosie Wright.
Good afternoon, it's 1 o'clock. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date. Now, the Ukrainian president has accused Russian forces of hiding mass civilian killings. Volodymyr Zelensky said at least 300 people have been killed in Bucha, where mass graves were found. The president's calling for a transparent investigation to bring the Russian military to justice. Volodymyr Zelensky is expected to address the United Nations Security Council later this afternoon.
For now, only in Bucha it is known that there have been more than 300 killed and tortured people. The number of casualties will probably be much higher when the entire town is checked, and this is only one town. Now there is information that in Borodyanka and some other liberated Ukrainian towns, the number of casualties may be even much higher. In many districts of the Kyiv, Chernihiv and Sumy regions, the occupiers did something that the locals did not witness during the Nazi occupation 80 years ago.
The Kremlin has called the US president's war crime comment on Vladimir Putin unacceptable and unworthy. Joe Biden had said that the Russian president is a war criminal and should be called for a trial. Russia denies the accusation, claiming Ukraine's special services staged the killings. The White House secretary says the US will push for Russia to be suspended from the UN Human Rights Council.
The president does not believe, he believes it's ludicrous for Russia to be a member of the Human Rights Council. Obviously, removing them would be the next appropriate step in the process.
In some other news now, cancer survival rates in England could go into reverse. The Health and Social Care Committee says that's due to a combination of people not seeking help for symptoms and also delayed treatments during the pandemic. They also say staff shortfalls are jeopardising progress on diagnosing more cancers at an early stage. A musician has pleaded guilty to the murder of the student Bobby Ann McLeod. 24-year-old Cody Auckland has entered the plea during an initial hearing at a Plymouth Crown Court. 18-year-old Bobby Ann was last seen waiting at a bus stop in Plymouth in November last year. Her body was found 3 days later, about 7 miles from where she lived. The Culture, Media and Sports Select Committee Chair, Gillian Knight, has questioned whether Channel 4's privatisation is revenge for what he calls biased coverage. The Culture Secretary, Nadine Dorries, says government ownership is holding the broadcaster back from competing against streaming giants like Netflix and Amazon. The channel was founded in 1982 and currently receives its funding from advertising. The Shadow Culture Secretary, Lucy Powell, told GB News selling the broadcaster would be a mistake.
It's a non-profit, publicly owned asset. It doesn't cost the taxpayer a single penny, and it reinvests all the money that it makes from advertising into small independent production companies and supports many jobs and opportunities around the UK. Selling it off to a foreign-owned media company, which is what would happen otherwise, we'll see reduced investment, we'll see profits being pulled away.
Gambling and lottery adverts won't be allowed to deliberately target under 18-year-olds from October. Celebrities, sports stars and influencers that appeal to young people are going to be banned from featuring in adverts. The Committee for Advertising Practice revealed the new measures, which aim to protect children and teenagers from one of the world's largest gambling markets. 8 fire engines and around 60 firefighters have been called to a fire in Southall in West London. Black smoke could be seen from Heathrow. The airport says the fire is not on its site and is not impacting operations. You're up to date on GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's head to Liam for On the Money.
And coming up on The Money today, the UK's biggest manufacturer of semiconductors, vital in everything from car making to computers, could soon be controlled by China. Is that a deal the government should block? We host a detailed discussion. Yet more disruption at UK airports as holidaymakers try to get away for an Easter break, with airline workforces depleted by COVID. We hear the latest from Manchester. We also discuss NFTs, those non-fungible tokens or digital images where ownership is recorded using cyber technology. How come the Treasury's suddenly interested? Plus, each day on The Money features an in-depth Money Talks interview. Today we meet former hedge fund manager turned novelist with interesting views on Russian sanctions. Jane Newman's new book has just been endorsed by cult novelist Lee Child. Stand by for a fascinating discussion. And as ever, I want your questions, opinions, ideas. What do you think of the issues raised in today's On the Money? Email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet @gbnews or me personally @Liam Halligan. Stay with us. This is GB News. I'm Liam Halligan, and you're On the Money. Now, Newport Wafer Fab is the UK's biggest manufacturer of semiconductors, vital across a host of sectors from car making to computing, from medicine to defence. Now, the ownership of this highly strategic company with manufacturing plants in Newport, South Wales and Stockport is under very close scrutiny. Why? Because Newport Wafer Fab could soon be fully controlled by China. And at a time of an acute semiconductor shortage across the world, to say nothing of growing geostrategic tension, the idea of Beijing pulling the strings of the UK's largest microchip factory is causing serious concern. Semiconductors, sometimes called integrated circuits or silicon chips, are the brains of modern electronics. Without them, you can't make radios, TVs, computers, cars, or modern defence and medical equipment. Newport Wafer Fab was founded in South Wales in the early 80s. Wafers are the thin cards used to mount circuit boards. In 2019, Newport Wafer Fab was bought by the Dutch company Nexperia. But last year, Nexperia was taken over by Wingtech of China, a transaction the UK government has yet to fully approve. MPs on the Foreign Affairs Select Committee highlight that semiconductors are vital to the UK's automotive industry. They say China, already a major producer, is looking to dominate and control global semiconductor supply. Whitehall is often slow, pushing back against Chinese influence. The mighty Huawei was invited to help build our 5G network. Remember, a decision later overturned. Beijing was also permitted to help build a new nuclear reactor at Hinkley Point in Somerset. Again, there was a controversial U-turn. GB News asked to speak to the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. No one was available for interview, but the department said in a statement, no decisions have been made. Nothing has been approved. The business secretary can and still might intervene in this transaction under the National Security and Investment Act. The government admits China poses a strategic threat to Britain, but will and should it block a Beijing takeover of Newport wafer fab? And that's our On the Money question today. Should we block Chinese control of strategic UK industries? Grown-up conversations with people who really know their stuff. That's what we do here on The Money. So it's a pleasure to be joined by Sir Ian Duncan-Smith, no less, who's tuning in all the way from Washington for this important conversation. Dominic Frisby, financial writer and author of Bitcoin, The Future of Money, is also with us. And in the studio is Max King, Money Week columnist and friend of the show. Max, good to have you with us. Ian, great to have you join us from Washington. You've been highlighting for months, years, the strategic dangers posed by Chinese control of certain parts of British industry. You're even sanctioned by the Chinese as things stand. What would be your advice to the government right now, if you were Prime Minister, if you were still leader of your party, about the future of this vital semiconductor manufacturer in South Wales?
Morning. Well, I would almost certainly say no to allowing this to be taken over. Nexperia is owned, as you said, by Wingtech. Wingtech are massively financed and invested in by various parts of the Chinese government. The Chinese banking system, the Chinese business system is completely beholden to the Chinese government under the security laws. Any data they have has to be reported back and transferred at request to the security organizations. And China itself has made a real effort to try and glean this technology. The one area that they have a problem with is in the microprocessor area, where the US still has a lead and the West generally has a lead over them. Of course, they've got their greedy eyes on Taiwan, and Taiwan is one of the biggest producers of microprocessors. The US has asked them to restrict any of their exports now to China. And in the US, such a takeover would now be blocked. Absolutely, certainly. The truth is that China poses a direct threat now to the West. It's the nature of its government and its egregious determination to dominate in these areas is all down to the fact that it knows full well that the West needs all of these technologies. You know, if you take all this together, it's not just the takeover of wafer fab. And in fact, if you look at China, China has 80% of the rare earth mines, has the world's biggest production capability for rare earth materials. So the West has to go there. The West has been asleep on the watch on this one. And it produces pretty much everything from plastic pots to the computer that I'm talking to you on at the moment. And all of these things pose a real problem for us as their economic dominance and power means that they're able, therefore, where they would wish to put real constraints on us. And we are not strategically sensible about this. You know, they, rather like Russia, are a government that determines that their form of government is right, and therefore they are selling that through the Belt and Road Project to all the developing world. So we have a serious wake-up to take place in this. And the final point to make is it's not just here, of course. They are flooding our universities with money, huge amounts of money. Many of those postgrad students end up on technology projects to do with defense programs, and the Americans have now already made it clear that they're concerned about the open door nature of our university system and the way in which quite a lot of that money is debauching the whole attitude, I suppose, to the nature of the Chinese government and the suppression of debates in universities. So these are big, big issues of which this is one part, but certainly if this was America, this would be blocked.
And you are joining us indeed from the States, Sir Ian, and we're grateful to you for getting up bright and early to join us here on The Money. Dominic, you often write about tech. You're a financial writer who likes to get into the nitty-gritty of subjects. What do you make of this, the fact that the ownership of our largest semiconductor factory hangs in the balance, with parts of the government reluctant to do anything about the prospect of Chinese control?
Well, I'm sorry that it doesn't make good TV, but I have to say I agree with every word that Ian's just said. The nature of globalization is that everyone's friends, and so it's fine to outsource everything. But of course, when the world goes to war, then the implications of that are very different. And, you know, we've seen a huge turning point in global geopolitics with the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And we've seen it's exposed just how dependent Germany in particular, Austria, Italy is on Russian natural gas, and how the stupidity, if you like, of them not diversifying. And were China to do something similar to Taiwan, there would be a very similar consequence, as Ian says, but not with natural gas, but with semiconductors. You know, Taiwan is to global semiconductors what Russia is to natural gas, if you like. And so it's very important that we, you know, we have been asleep at the wheel due to the peaceful, globalized world in which we've been living in the last 20 or 30 years. But it's very important that we take back control of important strategic assets. And this is one of those.
Max King, your instincts are broadly free market. You like international trade. You had a distinguished career in international finance. Does your support for free markets stop here, or would you say we should go ahead allowing China to take over Newport Wafer Fab, if indeed that's what Newport Wafer Fab, a privately owned company, wants to do?
Well, as Ian and Sir Ian and Dominic imply, if the Chinese were buying it because they thought it was a great company, which through research and development and investment could become a better company, then there might be a strong case for it. If, on the other hand, they're buying it because they want to grab the technology, manufacture it in China to advance what we should call their attack industries rather than their defense industries, then that should clearly be out of the question. That is not free markets in operation. That is pilfering technology which can only damage the rest of the world. So I think quite definitely this thing should be stopped. And perhaps, as Dominic implies, that the invasion of Ukraine should wake us all up and stop giving the autocracies the benefit of the doubt. In the past, we might give them the benefit of the doubt, and I think that turns out, with the benefit of hindsight, to be wrong. But no, we should not give them the benefit of the doubt. We should say, unless you can actually prove that it's for the world's good and our good that this company's taken over, the answer is absolutely no.
Sir Ian, last word to you. This is in Kwasi Kwarteng's inbox now. The business secretary's got a lot on his plate with the UK government's energy security strategy delayed, about to be published soon. What's your advice to Kwasi Kwarteng? What's your advice to Boris Johnson?
Well, do as you said you would do. The reason we passed this legislation was for it to be used. There's been no uncertain doubts about all of this. Russia has reminded us that if you deal with countries on the basis of how you wish they were rather than how they are, you will get your hands burned. China is set to become the largest economy in the world because the West has rushed to flood it with investment and money because they were able to do things cheaper. Under normal circumstances, that is a normal part of global dealing, but not when you're dealing with autocracies. I mean, this is a government, for God's sake, is committing genocide on the Uyghur people, slave labor. A lot of product is made in China under slave labor. The Tibetans are in slave labor camps. The Uyghurs are in slave labor camps. They've possessed the South China Seas without any rights to it whatsoever. They've trashed the Sino-British agreement on Hong Kong, and they're arresting peaceful democracy campaigns, putting them in jail for life, often torturing them. I mean, this is not a government that we should be assuming is okay on these matters. We've now got to wake up. Otherwise, we're going to end up in a seriously dangerous position.
Sir Ian Duncan-Smith, former Conservative leader, former Cabinet Minister, thanks so much again for joining us from the US on this important discussion about the future of British semiconductors. Dominic Frisby and Max King will be staying with us. This is On the Money with me, Liam Halligan, on TV, on DAB+, digital radio and online. After the break, we're talking crypto as the government hots up efforts to win over this burgeoning sector. Stay with us. You're On the Money.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewbs, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dewbs and Co. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewbs, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dewbs and Co.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. You're on the money with me, Liam Halligan. It's 1:20. Now, cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoin are seen by some as pretty controversial. But could impressions be changing? Only yesterday, Chancellor Rishi Sunak said he wants Britain to be, quote, a global hub for cryptocurrencies. The government also announced moves to recognise stable coins as valid forms of payment. And Sunak set to launch a non-fungible token, or NFT, through the Royal Mint. What does it all mean? Joining me now is Curtis Ting. He's formerly the FBI. He's now Europe, Middle East and Africa's Managing Director for Kraken, one of the world's largest cryptocurrency exchanges. And I'm still with Dominic Frisby, who is author of Bitcoin, The Future of Money, certainly the first book I ever saw on Bitcoin, and Max King is still with us. Let's talk to you first, Curtis. What do you think of this? Rishi Sunak saying that he wants the UK to be a global hub for cryptocurrencies. Is that a good thing?
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Liam. I attended the speech yesterday at the summit myself. Overall, yes, I think it's a good thing. I think I was struck mainly by the buzz in the room immediately after the speech. I think everyone recognizes, in the industry at least, that this is by far the clearest signal the government has ever given, that crypto is welcome as both a technology and an industry. I think as a whole, the speech was also quite in touch, refreshingly so, with the industry's challenges in the UK to date. The industry's existed here in the UK for about 10 years. It has not all been rosy. Mr. Glenn acknowledged challenges like the UK's temporary crypto regime, applying static law, as he called it, to new technology. Generally, he acknowledged how difficult it's been for crypto firms and regulators, without a larger crypto framework, to create a safe ecosystem that can compete with other countries. I thought the speech was very refreshing.
Curtis, you mentioned there John Glenn, who is, of course, UK Economic Secretary to the Treasury, one of Rishi Sunak's ministerial colleagues at the Treasury. Dominic, I know it's always frustrating for you talking about Bitcoin on television, given how much you know about it, given how long you followed the Bitcoin story. But let me just put this to you, and maybe you can knock these views down, because, of course, you're a huge proponent of Bitcoin. So Simon French, who's a pretty respected economist at Panmure Gordon, he suggested the Treasury's announcement that it was going to allow NFTs to be issued through the Royal Mint came 3 days late because it should have been an April Fool Julian Jessup, a very respected economist, a friend of the show. He's often on the money. He said, what on earth is the point of this? Tulip Sadiq, Labour's shadow economic secretary to the Treasury, John Glenn's opposition shadow, called the move a poorly judged gimmick. Why are they wrong?
Well, can I just start by picking up on something that Curtis said there, and that'll sort of answer your question. Curtis, I admire your admiration for British policymakers, but I'm afraid this feels very much like hot air to me. I've heard it all before. I remember, I think it was probably 2015, maybe 2016, George Osborne, the Chancellor then, making a big deal about the fact that he got some Bitcoins from a Bitcoin ATM in Canary Wharf. The UK was going to be the global centre of crypto technology. All this sort of what now we can see was basically hot air, because within a year or two of George Osborne making exactly the same noises that Rishi Sunak has just made, we had the FCA banning, that's the Financial Conduct Authority, banning all forms of crypto derivatives, which means, for example, it was impossible for ordinary investors to buy crypto ETFs, if you like, or companies that dealt in this kind of thing. And so, you know, you had on the one hand all this noise from the Chancellor, and then on the other hand, the actual actions that the FCA took made it very difficult for crypto firms to operate in this company and for ordinary investors to get exposure to it. And then if you want a sort of example of the total incoherence and inconsistency at the heart of UK policy making, you've got the Governor of the Bank of England, Andrew Bailey, who, by the way, is presiding over a policy that has inflation, real inflation north of 10% and interest rates at about 0.25%. So ordinary sterling holders are losing less than 10% of the value of their money per year. We have Andrew Bailey saying that cryptocurrencies are dangerous, that they have no intrinsic value. I mean, come on. And then he's saying if you want to invest in Bitcoin, be prepared to lose all your money. And only this week, he's saying that cryptocurrencies are the front line for scams. Now, do you know, Mr. Andrew Bailey, what is the most used currency for illegal activity? It is the US dollar. Now, who is calling for the banning of the US dollar based on that? So there is a total incoherence. Rishi Sunak saying one thing, probably trying to get a little bit of popularity because his popularity ratings have plummeted. Andrew Bailey saying something else. The FCA are doing something else. It is hot air and incoherence. And as for the NFT, just very, very quickly, Liam, sorry, I know I'm wittering on. As for the NFT, it's basically just a gimmick.
Here we have, never seen before on British television. It's Ting versus Frisbee. It's two cyber currency titans slugging it out. Max, we're old men in their way. What does it all mean?
Well, as I understand it, if we get into the world where cryptocurrencies fall under the wing of governments, what is the point?
Yeah, because the whole point of them is they're not controlled by government. So you can't print more cryptocurrencies. You can't debase them in that way.
So you start off with the government putting a long shadow over them, and then you start getting them interfering, and then eventually they become government currencies, at which point they disappear. So I totally agree with Dominic. I mean, but I agree with what he says, but then I also think, well, actually, why do we want Britain or any other government to be exercising or attract control over cryptocurrencies or any sort of influence? Actually, we don't.
Let's just go back to Curtis Ting. Curtis, you know, we're proud of Dominic Frisby. He's a rabble-rouser. He's a fabulous commentator. You're a serious guy. Maybe he thinks you're cuddling up to ministers a little bit too much. It's a bit too cosy. Why don't you tell us what you really think, Curtis?
There, frankly, I don't disagree with your view of how, every cycle or two, there's definitely political gestures made to the crypto industry. This time, though, I don't know about 2016. This time, 6 years on, I think it might be a little bit different. And the difference is simply, I don't know that the UK government has much of a choice. Across the channel, you have Europe making serious inroads on a new markets and crypto assets framework that is really deeply looking at how to create and foster a sustainable crypto industry. Back in the US, you have serious discussions going on, crypto caucuses forming about how to make the US the most attractive crypto hub. So, the difference may be from 2016, where this wasn't really a hot topic amongst various serious regulators, is that now it is. And so, as much as I applaud the speech yesterday and the gestures that were made, and of course, we're going to, as an industry, wait to see how the pen gets put to paper. We also recognize that the UK may also simply not have a choice but to engage seriously at this point.
Curtis, fabulous to have you with us. Curtis Ting, he's not only a cyber titan, he's also got a mixing desk in the background when he appears on British television. How cool is that? Dominic Frisby, I'm liking the new kind of interview pod you've created at home with all your books on it. Good for you, mate. It's a free country. And indeed, Max King, thanks so much for joining us. Fabulous discussion there. And we will return to that subject, of course, Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, and all the rest of it. Now, when P&O Ferries Chief Executive Peter Hepplethwaite sacked nearly 800 seafarers without notice on the 17th of March, happy St Patrick's Day, not, the move was met with wide criticism. Even Hepplethwaite later admitted to MPs that his company broke the law by not consulting with trade unions before making the redundancies. Now, Business Secretary Kwasi Kwarteng, he's busy, has confirmed the Insolvency Service has started, quotes, formal criminal and civil investigations into the sackings. Well, I've really benefited over recent days from the commentary from Charles Ball, Director of Legal Services at the Maritime Union Nautilus International. He's appeared here on The Money several times. He's back with us. Charles, what's your response to what Kwasi Kwarteng has said about launching those formal criminal and civil investigations?
Good afternoon, Liam. Well, Nautilus welcome this action very much. I mean, it's very clear that I think that that there are potential issues to be looking at. In particular, the failure to inform the flag states of the redundancies, which they only did actually on the day of the sackings themselves. That was supposed to be done several months before. Also, we think that the criminal investigation might involve looking as to whether that's an offence or not, and we think it is. There's a slight tweak when it comes to maritime because the reporting duty is to the flag state of the ships rather than to the Department of Business within the UK or the Insolvency Service. Also, in terms of civil action, what I have in mind that they might be looking at is potential disqualification of directors under the Directors Disqualification Act 1986. That basically gives the court to bar directors from being directors or shadow directors up to a period of 15 years. It often relates to insolvency of companies, but in this case we're not talking about insolvency, but the court can disqualify directors for breaching other statutory duties, including social duties, for instance, set out in relation to running of companies under the Companies Act. One of those is to keep an interest to keep a mind on the interest of employees, and also to comply with the various statutory duties that go with running a company, of which some have obviously been broken.
Charles, this is a very complex case. I believe it will turn into a test case at the start of what I think will be a period of heightened industrial unrest in the UK, unfortunately. We really value your counsel and we'll come back to you. But before you go on this occasion, let me just ask, P&O is saying of the 800 or so people who they have, quotes, made redundant, they've come to terms with around 400. They've done deals with around 400 of severance packages. Will those people be able to accept those agreed severance packages, even though there's a criminal and civil investigation now going on?
Yes, that won't. Any criminal or civil investigation will not affect the validity of a settlement package. So many seafarers are signing up to these packages, which have effectively been forced on them because it's either accept this or sue us in the employment tribunal, in which case it could take up to about 2 years to get a judgment. So once those settlement agreements are signed, those bar seafarers from bringing any further actions against P&O, unfortunately.
Well, Charles, we will stick with this story. And once again, we're grateful to you for your counsel. Charles Bowles there of Nautilus International on that ongoing P&O ferry saga. 800 people lost their jobs via a pre-recorded Zoom call. Nice. This is On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. Coming up, today's Money Talks interview is with Jay Newman, expert in dark money, sanctions and Russia. It's going to be an interesting one after the GB News headlines with Rosie Wright.
It's 1:33. I'm Rosie Wright. Let's get you up to date on GB News. The Ukrainian president has accused Russian forces of hiding mass civilian killings, saying that at least 300 people were killed in Bucha where mass graves were found. Volodymyr Zelensky is calling for a transparent investigation to bring the Russian military to justice. The Ukrainian president is expected to address the United Nations Security Council shortly this afternoon. The Kremlin has called the US president's war crime comment on Vladimir Putin unacceptable and unworthy. Joe Biden had said that the Russian president is a war criminal, and he's called for a trial. The White House secretary says the US will push for Russia to be suspended from the UN Human Rights Council. Cancer survival rates in England could go into reverse due to a combination of people not seeking help for symptoms and delayed treatments during the pandemic. The Health and Social Care Committee says staff shortfalls are jeopardising progress on diagnosing cancers at an earlier stage. Channel 4 says it's disappointed at the government's plans to privatise it. The Culture Secretary says the government ownership is holding the broadcaster back from competing against streaming giants like Netflix and Amazon. The Shadow Culture Secretary Lucy Powell told us selling the broadcaster would be a mistake. Climate activists Just Stop Oil have blocked a main road near Kingsbury Oil Terminal in Warwickshire by climbing on top of an oil tanker. They're ignoring a temporary High Court junction that prevents tankers from, and they are preventing tankers from entering and exiting the site. Activists have been blocking access to oil terminals over the past 5 days, demanding that the government stops new oil and gas projects. 10 fire engines and around 70 firefighters have been called to a garage fire in Southall, West London. The billowing smoke could be seen from Heathrow, but the airport says the fire is not on their site and is not impacting operations. Most of a single-storey commercial garage, an adjoining storage area and several cars are alight. Around 30 people have been evacuated from neighbouring properties. You're up to date on GB News, on your TV, online and DAB+ radio. Shortly, we'll be back to Liam and On the Money.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewbs, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dewbs and Co. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewbs, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dewbs and Co.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
And welcome back. You're on the money. It's 1:38. Now, anyone looking forward to going abroad over the Easter holidays might face some travel disruption. Airlines are still cancelling hundreds of flights daily, and Eurotunnel and ferry companies are also warning of delays. EasyJet and British Airways have blamed the disruption on high levels of staff sickness due to COVID. Our North West of England reporter Bradley Harris reports from Manchester Airport.
This is another day of disruption for the travel industry, particularly for Manchester Airport. I've been spending the day there at the Terminal 1 building, and it's incredible to see queues of people stretching as far back as the drop-off zone outside Terminal 1, and that's just to get into security. Once you're in there, it's reportedly long waiting times before you even board flights to then go away on your holiday. Remember, for many people, this is the first time that they're going away for their Easter school holidays since COVID restrictions for international travel were dropped. Taking a look at the airlines, EasyJet are saying that they're going to cancel around 60 flights in and out of the UK today. Yesterday, that was 62 flights that they cancelled. And of course, on the weekend, 222 flights cancelled. So still disruption for the airlines, and that's because of staff COVID sickness. That's a similar situation for airports such as Manchester and Heathrow, people falling sick from COVID, not being able to turn up to work, but also just simply not having enough staff, because Manchester Airport lost a lot of their jobs during the pandemic, and now they're scrambling to get people back into work again. At the moment, though, they're finding it incredibly difficult to deal with the sudden influx of passengers going away for their Easter school holidays. So at the moment, they are trying their best. Of course, the last thing they want is this disruption. They've already had a difficult time of it with the pandemic and taking a hit with their profits. So, of course, they want to get people on their flights. But it's certainly such a frustrating time for passengers who are waiting 3-4 hours before they get on their flight. So if you are thinking about going abroad, getting away for the Easter holidays, really think about what time you leave your house, because it's likely you might be waiting for quite some time.
Wise words as ever from Bradley Harris there at Manchester Airport. And it's time now for my daily interview series, Money Talks. And today I'm talking to Jay Newman. He's a sovereign debt expert and author of Undermoney, a new novel. Born in New York City, Jay studied economics at Yale. He spent 4 decades in finance, leading one of the most notable trades in history when he recovered billions of dollars in defaulted debt from the Argentinian government. Newman's an expert in so-called dark money, in sanctions, and in Russia in particular. And he's recently published his debut thriller, described by author Lee Child as essential reading. It makes your heart beat faster, but also teaches you something big. It's called Undermoney, the first of a 3-book series. And here he is, tuning in all the way from Florida. It's Jay Newman, my latest guest on Money Talks. Jay, great to have you with us. I've followed financial issues all my life. I've been an asset manager myself. That trade you did with Elliott Management, it does go down in folklore. Just outline briefly for viewers and listeners who aren't aware what you had to do to try and get some money back on that defaulted Argentinian debt.
Well, it took almost 15 years. Argentina is a recidivist deadbeat. They've defaulted 7 or 8 times in the course of their history as a republic. And it just goes to show what happens when a sovereign decides it simply doesn't want to pay. You have to get it to a point where it does want to pay. And in the case of Argentina, what finally brought it to the table after 15 years was a change of administration from the Kirchner regime to the Macri administration, and the desire to get back into international capital markets. Those were the 2 keys.
It is an interesting tale. It's almost stranger than fiction. There were Argentinian naval vessels being corralled in West Africa. It was a movie, or at least it should be a movie. Certainly, if I was a script writer, I'd be. Or maybe there's a movie in the works. I don't know. But tell us, Jay.
I hope it will be. The what you refer to, attaching a naval vessel in Ghana, was the high point, or in some would say for Argentina. the low point. But we needed to get their attention, and that's what got their attention.
And of course, it meant you bought this so-called distressed debt at a very low price, but then when it was finally paid back to a much higher degree than thought, you and your investors made money, but you also set the example on international markets that you do actually have to repay debts. It's great to talk to you. I've followed your career for a long time. Tell me, what do you think about sanctions on Russia? Your government, my government, they're imposing big restrictions on trade of energy, of food, fuel, commodities from Russia. Also, very few of those commodities, soft commodities, crops and so on, can get out through Ukraine. Do you think that's the right thing to do?
At this point, it seems like it was the only thing to do. But sanctions are a two-edged sword. They don't typically result in change of regime. So we've seen sanctions imposed against Iran, same regime, against North Korea, same regime, Cuba, same regime. Russia, it remains to be seen whether we'll have a change of regime or whether someone in the regime will take matters into their own hands. But sanctions alone don't do it if you've got an autocrat. And what's concerning about sanctions is that we've now shown the full scope of our maximalist level of sanctions. We've shown as Western nations what we can do. And the people that we're trying to sanction and to restrict now know the full scope of that activity. And you wonder what they're planning.
What would you say to the argument, Jay, that the US is in a much better position to withstand sanctions on Russia, the blowback, than Europe is, than the UK is? The US has a lot of its own oil and gas these days, particularly because of all that shale energy. It's Europe that's going to bear the brunt of the sanctions. So in the end, it's Western Europe that will buckle. Would that surprise you?
It wouldn't surprise me at all. I think that the U.S. does have the ability to withstand sanctions much better. I was reading just the other day the effect that if gas is cut off or reduced, as it has been, the effect that's going to have on the middle companies in Germany. Some companies are going to close, but sanctions are going to affect all of us around the world in terms of inflation. It's going to get translated back in terms of higher costs for oil, for gas, as you say, for agricultural commodities, for palladium, rare earths. It's inevitable. It's not that Russia won't be able to sell what it's got for sale. It will sell it. It'll all leak out through China or through India. Just the prices are going to be higher. It's not, sanctions create a kind of a leaky boat instead of a streamlined ocean liner.
And talking about good wordsmithery, you've written this book, Undermoney. What is Undermoney, and how can people get interested in a novel that's basically about finance? A lot of people find finance a bit of a turn-off.
I hate to say that I predicted a lot of what's going on today, but I predicted it. Vladimir Putin is a character in the book, as is a guy named Fyodor Volk, who is modeled on Dmitry Utkin. Utkin, we've all been reading, runs something called the Wagner Group, which is a private military company that does a lot of work for Russia and for Putin in Syria, in Crimea, and now in Ukraine. And what happens in the book is that the patriotic Americans decide that they want to change the world, but they fall into league with this mercenary. And from there, it's a very slippery slope. But what the connection I tried to make is to show the linkages between money and power and money. And undermoney refers to money that is flowing under the surface. You can't see it, but it's there because you see its effects. It influences people and events. And that's the red pill I hope people will swallow when they read the book.
You're following in the traditions, aren't you, of Michael Lewis, who, of course, wrote Liar's Poker, who wrote The Big Short, who wrote Moneyball, somebody who's shown that if you really know what you're talking about, then you can make finance interesting. You can open this world to a broad audience. You must be pleased with some of the endorsements you got. I mentioned Lee Child earlier, obviously one of the world's biggest selling fiction authors. You got Niall Ferguson, the Harvard academic. You got James Grant, one of the best-known financial writers. Do you think you can make a decent go of this novel writing game?
I'm going to try. It's been really gratifying to see all of those guys supporting it and blurbing it, and Nelson DeMille also, and many of my idols. But you really nailed it. Michael Lewis was one of my inspirations, as was Tom Wolfe, Norman Mailer. And I hope what I've done is to bring finance into a realm that is more comprehensible for people, but also to demonstrate something about the vast wealth that's been accruing to a very small number of people over particularly the last 15 or 20 years. These sums are huge, and they're used to influence politics in very dramatic ways I think we haven't seen ever before.
Indeed. Jay Newman, look forward to seeing you again when you come to the UK, come into the studio, and we'll continue this discussion. Jay Newman there, my latest guest on Money Talks, author of Undermoney and legendary financier. You really need to look up the story of Elliott Finance and the Argentinian sovereign debt. It's well worth following. Now, the humanitarian cost of the Russia-Ukraine conflict is, of course, devastating, but there's also been a damaging effect, as we've been hearing there, on the global economy. The war's upending supply chains across the world. As shipping from Russia and Ukraine is both politically and practically disrupted by this conflict. But supply chains, of course, had already been destabilised long before the war, as we came out of that COVID pandemic. Joel Hyatt is a supply chain expert and he's CEO of Globality. Tell me how you pronounce the name of your company.
You got it just right, Liam. Globality.
Globality. So it's worth pointing out, isn't it, that global supply chains were seriously disrupted. Obviously, we locked down the whole world economy. For months after that, before this Russia-Ukraine business started, the world economy was struggling to get back into gear.
Well, and it was getting back into gear. We were just seeing light at the end of the tunnel as it pertained to the real disruptions of supply chain. When war in Europe broke out and exacerbated the whole supply chain problems all over again, in the ways that you've already discussed. I mean, disrupting a lot of agricultural exports from what's considered the food basket of the world coming out of Ukraine and Russia in terms of wheat and corn and what have you. But also in terms of travel, planes don't fly over Russian airspace. Flights have added as much as 10 hours of time at an incredible cost of fuel to avoid Russia. And of course, fuel's never been more expensive. So we're seeing tremendous disruptions, but they're not new. And the real result of all this is that companies are understanding they have to rethink how they do their supply chains so that they're more flexible, more resilient. Companies can't rely on just a few suppliers anymore. They can't rely on suppliers just in one or two countries. They have to understand there are now health risks we never understood previously, like pandemics. There are clearly geopolitical risks. Look, people didn't anticipate war in Europe. Look, there are risks, and companies have to prepare now for unknown risks to come and be much more resilient. Now, the good news is that technology, sophisticated artificial intelligence, and digital solutions can make it possible for companies to access suppliers all over the world that they never accessed before through technology and through knowledge capture and knowledge sharing that artificial intelligence can do. That's what we do at Globality. And at the same time, bringing sophisticated artificial intelligence and automation to the sourcing and procurement of not just goods, but in our case, very importantly, services. What you're doing is creating more inclusive economies. You're allowing more firms around the world to participate in the global economy.
You are. We remember when the Berlin Wall fell in the late 80s, the age of globalization began. Right. And you're saying, rightly, obviously, that, technology means communication is there, but the physical movement of goods is getting much, much harder as we came out of the pandemic, now because of the war between Russia and Ukraine. Is the age of globalization over, despite this massive information interaction, Joel Hyatt?
I don't think so. I think the age of globalization has been interrupted, if you will.
Okay.
And it's going to be rethought. As you know, it is true that
with more local production.
It will have more local production.
Farmers watch this show.
It will
Small
have
business leaders watch this show. Will they be importing and exporting less? Will we be falling back as the US has on more, domestically produced energy, more domestically produced food? Is that the future?
There's going to be more balance. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
I think. Look, these are trends. Let's remember the benefits of globalization, which were massive. They brought 2 billion or more people out of poverty in the developing world. It was huge. And the cost of goods and services for everybody in the world went down.
That's capitalism, whatever you think of it.
That's exactly right.
It pulled people out of poverty as the post-communist world came into the global economy.
That's exactly right. Now, where you have logistics disruptions and you can't get trucks and you can't get planes and you can't move goods, you adjust. We're in a period of adjustment. It's not permanent. You're not going to put the genie of globalization back in that bottle and rub it in the future. It's just going to rebalance for a while to deal with the practical realities that companies and consumers find themselves facing.
Do you think if we hadn't had, counterfactual is always hard, if we hadn't have had the war between Russia and Ukraine, would the post-pandemic supply chain disruptions now be over, or we still be feeling them? How disjointed did the global economy become during that astonishing lockdown? Ships in the wrong places, logistics out of kilter all over the world.
They would not be over, but we would have made a lot more progress.
Yeah.
And in part because one of the impacts of the pandemic was to accelerate significantly the transformation that companies had to digital solutions and technology. They had to do that because it was the only way
to deal.
It was the only way to have a more resilient and flexible supply chain. And so what happened is across the board, for example, people worked at home. You had to have different communications tools. You had to be able to collaborate, throughout the far-flung, operations globally of these big companies. And it was all different when people were in lockdown. So companies moved much more aggressively to adopt technology. That technology is also contributing to bringing supply chains and the normal conduct of business back to where we started.
So once we're back, we'll be improved. That's
exactly
your
right.
basic message.
That's exactly right.
Joel Hyatt, I've really enjoyed the discussion. I wish it could be longer. Come back on the show. You are the co-founder and the CEO of Globality.
Thank you.
Got it.
Nice seeing you, Liam.
Who says finance and economics isn't interesting? Where else do you get these kind of guests about these incredible subjects that impact you? We've only got time for a few of your views today. Thanks to all of you who have written in and continue to stay in touch with On the Money. Alex says, China's the next major challenge to our democracy. Under no circumstances should vital semiconductor businesses be sold to the Chinese state. Daniel, crypto's operated via computers, says Daniel. What do computers need to work? If you haven't guessed, it's silicon. Computers have a short, finite lifespan. They certainly do. Thanks for your emails. That's all we've got time for today. I'll be back tomorrow at 1 p.m. on GBNews, TV and DAB plus digital radio and online. We'll be focusing on the national insurance tax changes which come in tomorrow. What joy! But we've got to face up to these realities and we'll be explaining what's going on. This is GB News. I'm Liam Halligan and that was On the Money.
Hello, Alex Deakin here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. Big contrast with the weather today. It could be 17 across the south, whereas we have heavy snow falling in parts of northern Scotland. Here's the bigger picture. Weather fronts just edging in across the UK, bringing warm air with them, but the cold air is persisting across the far northeast. And it's as these weather fronts hit the cold air that we're seeing some heavy snowfall. Already seen a fair, but likely to intensify later this afternoon. Again, we have a Met Office yellow warning in place. Parts of Aberdeenshire, particularly up towards Moray, Caithness, Sutherland. Some heavy snow really building up in places by the end of today. Rain across central and southern Scotland and Northern Ireland later. Patchy rain for northwest England, but most of England and Wales dry and fine in the sunny spells in the south. 16, 17 is possible, so really quite mild. We are going to see rain heading into northern England, though, through this evening, spreading across Wales as well. The snow should start to ease in northern Scotland, turning more back to rain, although it stays very wintry in Shetland, where temperatures are likely to stick close to freezing. Elsewhere, it will be a very mild night, certainly across the south, but a colder feel during Wednesday, and a different day for England and Wales, a blustery day with showers. Now, most of the showers will be of rain, but starting to turn wintry again across the highlands of Scotland. And the winds will be picking up, getting very blustery during Wednesday evening. Now, the gusty winds mean the showers will zip through, so there will be sunny spells on Wednesday. Temperatures still in double figures into the teens across the southeast, but feeling colder because of that wind, which will strengthen further on Wednesday evening, particularly for Northern Ireland, Western Scotland, but everywhere blustery. Lots more showers coming in, most of them of rain, as I said, but turning back to snow again across parts of northern Scotland as we head into Thursday. Colder feel then for the rest of the week. Showers in Scotland and northern England, but some sunny spells, but temperatures tailing off.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewbs, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dewbs and Co. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewbs, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dewbs and Co.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is